Well, as Gerard stated, I am very appreciative and honored whenever I get an invitation to come share what I would like to call some truthful conversations with an audience that is as prestigious as it's important to understand. Oh, I need to turn this on.
Yeah.
Okay, let's start over. Afternoon.
Oh.
Yeah. All right, as Gerard stated, thank you, Gerard, for inviting me. As I stated 15 seconds ago, it's always an honor and a privilege to be invited to have such important conversations with such important people that are really on the ground doing the work. I'm going to share a little bit about me and try to paint a very holistic picture about how I've been able to use my formal and informal education for social justice and activist work that I think I have been able, my firm has been able to broadly expand a definition, starting from community, family, neighborhood, and all the way up to space. So I am born and raised in Columbia, South Carolina. I am, all right, Gamecocks, right? All right, national championship, women's, right? Let's give it up. Let's go, right? I am one of five. I am the youngest of five. I am not the baby, but I am the youngest. I am a public school graduate. I'm proud of being a public school graduate. I entered Wofford College in 1994, Liberal Arts College in Spartanburg, South Carolina. Earned a bachelor's degree. I was fortunate enough to spray water on the 109 other football teammates that I had. Fortunate enough to get an education/athletic scholarship, which turned the lights on that maybe I do have something more to offer than what I see outside my window. I have a master's in criminal justice, a master's in alcohol and drug studies, and a PhD in criminology. So all that formal education over the 22 years was intentional. I knew and learned through my journey that in order for you to be able to make some structural change, you got to put yourself in a room of legitimacy in order to be with the people that make the decisions. One of the most impressive light bulbs that I have, and I am going to connect this to being a messenger, was I opened a bail bonding company in 1999. I was working on my second master's degree at University of South Carolina. I did an internship working with the first adult drug court program, and in between my internship duties, I would gallivant around and walk into different criminal courtrooms. And it was that day that the light bulbs began to turn on about what I had actually lived through in my family and neighborhood, that there was a system out there that was looking at these issues in a totally different way. And I started hearing numbers like 25,000, 150,000, criminal charges, and I actually got excited. So I go downstairs and have a conversation with two of my friends that are assistant district attorneys, and they introduced me to the concept of bail bonding. It is one of the hot topics in the criminological field right now. We have a number of different conversations about what this first phase means to people when you can or cannot have the resources to get out of jail, regardless of the offense that you've been accused of. I took advantage of this opportunity. I grew up in some of the streets, they say, of Columbia, and I had formal education, and I still had relationships with everybody that I had created them from the first time I got bused to a different public school because somebody thought I was smart, to the kids that never made it to the football team, never were able to graduate because of some of these structural conditions that we're going to talk about. And a light bulb came on that my mother making $12,000 as a custodian in one of these elementary schools, I could change it overnight. I could change it overnight. I opened up a company, and the first day I opened it up, I made $2,000 from two of my fraternity brothers from getting in a fight at the University of South Carolina. And for the next 6.5 years, next 5.5 years, I didn't look back. My company was open for 6.5 years. Why am I separating that 1 year? Because another light bulb came on around year 5, and I realized that I was taking advantage of the most vulnerable people at the most vulnerable time. Changed my generation. My daughter went to an all-black private school from age 4 till it was time to enter public school. She recited Madam C.J. Walker, her entire identity, in about 3.5 minutes without using paper at the age of 5. I got excited that my mother no longer had to go into other folks' homes as a domestic servant to be able to put food on the table because her baby had finally grown up and was the breadwinner for our family. That felt good. As I started seeing the identities of everyone walking into my office and I'm babysitting, carrying all these different hats as a bail bondsman. Now I'm a babysitter, now I'm a, excuse me, no offense, now I'm a counselor, unlicensed. Because the folks that are coming in the room aren't just about the criminal offense that they've been charged with. They bring everything into the room. Gender started popping out of off my bail bonding table as the women that were accused of theft for writing a bad check to feed the babies would look at me and say, Chad, you must be crazy to think I'm not going to take care of my babies and walk across the street to go to court. And I'm like, I got $500 over you. If you don't go to court, I got to take you to jail. She said, well, you better get ready to be a stepdaddy because you're going to have to take care of some babies. Light bulbs started turning on in me. Light bulbs, like, wow, it is so much more deeper than what the idiot box, excuse me, the television and those things called journalism actually write about these systems and these folks that are being denigrated by these structures. And here I am in year 5, making over $100,000 for the first time and the first person in my family. Why should I turn back? Why should I give that up? Because it was wrong. And we are charged as humanitarians to do the right thing. And I had enough confidence during the war on drugs at the age of 14 when crack hit the streets of Columbia to make a conscious decision that there was a much better plan for me than to denigrate my neighborhood by putting alcohol and drugs in the minds and the bodies of my aunts that were also mothers. I was also afraid to do 5 to 25 years as our criminal justice sentencing practices were totally racially and class-oriented bodies. All these things began to pop out to Chad during this time. I bought the first house in my family. Houses opened up, or Epiphany Properties became a rental property owner. All this happened in the span of about 5 years. That day it hit me, oh, the first person I had to take back to jail to was my first cousin. We're like 7 months apart. That's like a real funny story. Then it dawned on me when this epiphany came that I had much more to do. Because my initial mission when I decided to open up the Department of Correction jail doors was to let everybody out. And I mean everybody. It wasn't my job to determine whether or not you were guilty. My job was to put you back on the street so the collateral consequences that I knew that the system gave, I could equalize. Collateral consequences is what I mean when a person doesn't have $50 to get back to their families. There's loss of job. There's the credit impact. There's the removal from the neighborhood. And we're talking about informal education where these folks in the neighborhoods, regardless of what you thought of them or what we think of them, they were stewards in their neighborhood. We all got to have some form of social attachments and bonds, folks. And we don't always get to choose whether or not they can be positive or negative. And these were what society likes to say, I think is a cuss word. These were role models to a lot of people. They were really having turkey giveaways in the neighborhoods in the same place, the duality of it, right? In the same place where they pumping all the crack cocaine. Very confusing. But can you imagine trying to get away from the structural barriers of low educational attainment, high unemployment, poverty, schools without desks? What else can you see outside of your window? I have honest conversations when I'm given an opportunity to stand in front of people. And we're going to have one today. So in doing that, I decided that $16,000 as a research assistant at the University of Delaware was much more attractive to me. But guess what I did? I took the show on the road. I couldn't become a part of reducing mass incarceration as a bail bondsman because I had no legitimacy. I went to get the PhD only to be in the room with the people that made decisions about the United States bail system overall. I did it. I got that degree in 6 years, had opportunity to work on some great projects, worked on the Wilmington Street Park project, funds $200,000 grant from President Obama's Safe Initiatives Act. Life began to change. And as you know, some of us that have been fortunate to receive these PhDs, sometimes the psychology wears on you in academia. I began to change. I began to look through an entirely different lens about what life was about and what my role and my purpose was. I didn't want to go into academia. My advisor said, you got something that no one else understands and talking about. You got something that starts with the first phase. Forget the practices of law enforcement. Forget judges making decisions. You got something that happens in approximately 34 seconds, depending on what city you're in. When I did the research as an ethnographer, I took a stopwatch in the courtroom in Philadelphia and Atlanta, and you can see these decisions about people's lives being made unconsciously. And I mean systemic is what it really was. Name, date, as soon as that was called the offense, he would ask the district attorney, would ask the public defender, because 95% of the people coming through our system are poor. There was no private defense attorney set up there. There was no ACLU in this hot, sweaty room. There was only these people that, most of them, didn't have a support system. There wasn't a teacher. There wasn't a preacher standing up there to vouch for, this is just the first time he has decided to rob the store. It wasn't happening. They were bereft of enough information from my perspective as a researcher and a scholar to make such important decisions about people's lives. Some of them never made it out of that jail for $50 because they didn't have the finances or the resources. I took a job at Delaware State University, stayed there 2 years, was unsatisfied in higher ed. Moved to Lynchburg College in 2014 as a criminology professor, and I began to start consulting. My first opportunity to consult was to address, as Gerard talked about, what we're working on, fortunate to work on now. Lynchburg College was facing some strong issues around suspending and expelling minority students at a disparate rate. I jumped in full go. Said, here's my opportunity to show exactly what my training and my educational experiences have brought me. So, in doing this work, diversity, inclusion, race, gender, began to pop out again. But we're looking at school systems and teachers, and wait a minute, that key term again was systems. When I began to have conversations with them, everyone gets beat down by what the United States loves to do, is categorize everything. How many of us are tired of talking about race? I am. I'm a black man and I'm sick and tired of it, just like a lot of those school teachers whom we love and appreciate, but are often vilified in our media for not being able to do some jobs. When I started having conversations with them and trying to get to the root of the problems, race was not the conversation that they wanted to have. And they would say to me, well Dr. Starks, when the black kids go on field trips with us and they don't have enough money, I pay for them to go. Okay. But Dr. Starks, I can't be racist because guess what I don't see? Color. Are y'all looking at who's standing up in front of y'all today? Do y'all see all this color? Do you think it bothers me that in the mirror I see the reflection of what I'm supposed to love as our country likes to profit? Unconsciously, what we do when we have this conversation about post-racial society and don't see color, you're telling that young man and woman of color, which we all have, you're not supposed to like yourself. That I'm supposed to see myself as being just like you, just like you. No, what makes us special around this cuss word of diversity is that the opportunity to appreciate the difference. It should invite us into an opportunity for engagement to say, where are you from? Ethnicity is a different conversation. But for some reason, we have been culturally conditioned over a while that race is no longer a part of what we should be focusing on. Yeah, we know we had a black president. Let's go ahead and get it out, right? There's a new article coming out right now in the criminal justice literature where we've had some conservatives take a very strong stance around talking around racism. And these are scholars that are in our network. And I will quote, you had a black president, and guess what's the only race to have a national holiday? Dr. Martin Luther King. These are scholars, and this series of articles are going to come out in late August. Then tell me why this is so valid. Then tell me why the disparities continue to jump off the screens if that is so true around post-racial society. What we're actually doing in framing it as post-racial is you're telling us in the world that it no longer matters. And some of us, and I mean from my homeboys, my very good day one friends, they begin to hear that from people that have titles that they never had access to. And we're always climbing this ladder of looking up, because if we really love who we are, then we understand that those are just titles earned through formal education. Because these are the ones that I've always trusted with, quote, keeping it real, because the lived experiences are what gives you that substantive knowledge about struggle. But what we do is we remove that, and we have people in high positions, especially some now in government, that are saying, really? That's over with. These are scholars at very prestigious institutions that are writing it, but we still have these disparities. I'm very confused on why I would not ask someone to love himself, love his or her history, and we want to remove this from the conversation. I'm different, y'all, and I'm so glad to be different. We are all different. Tell me what the issue is with understanding why the difference has to be a problem. Why do we want to do a equality conversation? Equality had its place, right? During the civil rights era, that's what a lot of legislation was about. That was a lot of the conversations and abuse, discrimination. We wanted to be equal, and I mean we as in people. We wanted the same access to resources. We wanted the same bathrooms. We know what equality was. But what has happened to those conversations now? We've had a shift from the civil rights era, haven't we? That's no longer the conversation. The conversation now is about equity. I'm pretty sure not to insult anyone. We know what equity is. If you have 3 kids, we've seen that model, standing in a fence watching the baseball game, and then there's these boxes over here, and there's one kid that's 5 foot, 5'5", or 6 foot for a 6-foot fence. If you give equally each kid a box, it warms our heart, doesn't it? And I want you to think about like legislation when I'm saying this, because we're going to paintbrush this thing with one swoop. We're going to give 3 boxes. Can the 5-foot kid say over a 6-foot box with a ½ inch box? No. You only made him 5'5", or her. Excuse me. What's wrong with passing 2 boxes to the shortest kid, pass the 3rd box to the middle-sized kid, and we can rotate with the tippy toes for our 6-foot. That's equity. But this shift from the civil rights era of not focusing on race has brought us to this conversation around, being post-racial. Where do we go from here? How do we get this conversation into a whole new arena? One thing that we've done, and we're fortunate about with BCS and Associates, and don't worry, being the messenger is going to hit you in a minute, is that I am proud to say that we have been blessed with a collaboration that I'm not exactly sure happens too often. We are starting an I Know I Can Institute focusing on kids in the Lynchburg City School District from the ages of 14 to 18 that are under the umbrella of 60% free and reduced lunch. We are doing a direct program to address Generation 2 poverty. And the local government pointed up the money to support my theoretical framework and my philosophy about how to address these structural barriers. I am jumping out of my seats to have government and school systems. For a person like me, right, this was like looking up when you were 8, 9 and saying what you wanted to do. You wanted to be in the room, but the people that have resources believe in you to get the resources to marginalized populations. How fortunate can I be? It started in 2008 when I was in University of Delaware working on a PhD, where a colleague, a physicist, comes and he says, Chad, I think there's something you can help us with. NASA Delaware Space Grant has us on, NASA has us on probation because we don't have an outreach component. We don't have enough underrepresented groups applying for our scholarships and fellowships. And I said, wait, so you have resources in your closet, in your balcony, in the basement that you can't get to women and students of color? I begged them. I begged them to give me an opportunity, and I said, I guarantee you that I will have more than you could have ever asked for. Started in 2012, we broke numbers. We broke the records in the history of Delaware. 2013, we did it again. It didn't take a PhD to understand cultural competency or why certain people historically don't think these institutions are in favor of them. I'm sorry, a flyer will not work for this population. They're gonna walk past it because grandma has told her, baby, just go to that school, keep your head down, don't get in no trouble, graduate, and get you a job. What do you mean, Chad? I passed out the flyers to everyone. Wow. How many times, Professor, have you ever stopped and invited her to come to your office and say, hey, I've noticed that you've been doing very well in my class. Here's an opportunity, and no one is going to give you anything. Here's an opportunity I think that you've earned, and I'll be willing to write a letter of recommendation if you will work on your application to apply. That didn't take the training that UD gave. It didn't take the $10,343 that I paid for the first semester because I was not funded, but we'll talk about my grades in undergrad later. It didn't take that training to know that if something isn't working before, then we should use a non-traditional way of reaching populations. That's what I've been fortunate enough to do. All those stories with bail and busing from the 9 years old to go to another school, all I did was combine those and say, if we want the outcome that we really are about, why don't we change the method and the journey to get it? I started speaking at national NASA conferences in 2013, it was 10 minutes. 2014, it was 25. 2015, it was 30. Last year's 2016, I did my first workshop around implicit bias. NASA came in the room standing up there as if they were armed guards. And they said, this was wonderful. We're gonna have to give you more time. I got a phone call 2 months ago and I have an hour and a half in North Dakota this year. But Chad, we don't just want your training, we want you to help us with strategic plans. That's the next level. That's the next level. So I got 50 directors of space grants that I have the honor of standing in front of. Being the messenger is the opportunity to put my philosophy, my work, my value, my proof, my childhood into their spirits. I put it in their souls and they cannot leave this room as a cosmopolitan canopy and only have value when we're in the space together. My responsibility, your responsibility is go back to your respective spaces and take this non-traditional way of thinking and become messengers. You don't become messengers just as counselors in your office. You don't become messengers just as PhD criminologists in the classrooms. let's turn it on its head for a little bit and think about the conversations we have at the dinner table at home. Because I can tell you who Mama told me to stay away from. Shall I explain it? She was a victim of that, right? She lived in a great deal of fear. One of the first stories she said was when she was laying down in the cotton fields while the school bus was coming as one of 14 children, how embarrassed she was that my grandfather with a second grade education said work over school. She was born in 1941. Work over school. He had 14 children. He was the first African American to buy a home in a predominantly white neighborhood. One day I'm walking across campus at the University of Delaware, the only minority in a PhD program, and I started feeling sorry for myself. Man, why I gotta be the only one in the classroom? Every time they say the word black, they turn and look at me. And my grandfather comes out of nowhere as the messenger, and he's standing there saying, boy, I had to slap your mother one day because the bales of cotton that we sold from the plantation owner, he cheated me out of bundles. And my mother, with her smart mouth, she says, Daddy, he's cheating you. Gets back in the truck, she's crying. Why did you do that? Don't you ever disrespect me in front of a white man again. My identity, right? His identity had been challenged. Now what makes you think I didn't know that he was cheating? And it was at that point where I was like, wow, can you imagine what he had to emotionally endure, psychologically endure, in order to put food on the table? Something that young men right now carry their guns because their identity is so important. How can we get this message out? How can I get that across to everybody I come into? It doesn't matter the profession. It doesn't matter the career. My mother graduated as a salutatorian in a high school where they had one room for school. And there were first graders all the way to 12th graders. Do I need to go show the statistic around poverty and education again? How could she survive out of that environment? And we have way more resources now, and we're having the same issues over and over. We need messengers. We need honest conversations. We need conversations that sometimes hurt. We need to understand that an emotional pain is just like a happy emotion. We are all deserving of them. But for some reason, as I'm working with Lynchburg City Schools, feelings and emotions and having these honest conversations to change these outcomes was not invited. You don't have to show by hands, but for the great work that you do, how often do you feel like that happens to you? So what are these stumbling blocks along the way from the greatest nation in the world, the most resources? What could possibly be these stumbling blocks? I write about something that I framed as ethic of care. Ethic of care is, I give an example. Did an article on juvenile delinquency in the Midwest where we looked at the different courtroom work group members who was coming through, who was sick and tired of seeing the same kids coming through. Probation officers, private defense attorneys, assistant DAs, caseworkers, and of course it was the people on the ground that had no access. It was the probation workers. And they started talking about how it feels to them when they just sent a 15-year-old kid home last year to see the same 16-year-old kid come back through the door. And I was like, man, they're taking that home with them. That's tough. Then I realized the most difficult thing I think in this world to do is to care. What do you mean we care? We're good people. When you care, you change your pronouns. Your pronouns no longer are I or me. It's they, it's them, it's we. We gotta own all these issues that we are a part of, folks, whether it's directly or indirectly. And we gotta start as messengers having some of these tough conversations and challenging different ways of thinking that we know are right, that we know spaces to forget about the responsibilities that we have been, and I would say blessed with. But there's a whole lot of places where I go in conversations and talk to people that have to do bed checks as unfortunate folks. A lot of my work has been done in the penal systems. I've had classes where I taught and actually had interaction with some of the most intelligent people ever. And I know what you're saying, they got a long time to do homework. I get it. I get it. But if I may, just extending the conversation, for me, this is where it starts. It starts with the mindset. How are we thinking about these issues? How are we thinking about ourselves? How are we thinking about the responsibility that we have? And it's not easy. It's not easy. And most often when I'm having my workshops, I ask folks about self-reflection and self-awareness. How many of us have taken time to tap into ourselves and know what makes us happy? And really write it out. What makes us sad? What makes us afraid? Why does that make you happy or afraid? And when you can make your day much more simplistic than the clock and a schedule, you can connect to much more grounded versions of why we have the outcomes that we do. I don't think that what I'm doing or what my firm is doing or what the philosophical approach about being a messenger is rocket science. That is not what I'm here saying. I'm taking some very basic opportunities and conversations to make this simple, to make it very simple. How do our kids go to school every day and end up in handcuffs? Simple. Yeah, there's a lot of things that happens, I get, but simple. As messengers, what conversations are we having? Are we just checking the box and pushing our clients? Those of us that teach in higher ed, our students, are we pushing them out the door? Are we actually using some fierce conversations and listening to their concerns and issues and using our skill sets as messengers to give them a different opportunity than what they think they can? That's what the Institute is about. The Institute that we're starting is an assets-based institute. There will be no derogatory language from the students, any of my facilitators, or anyone that walks in the room. And what I mean by derogatory language is the systemic language that seeps into the psyche of doubt, right? Poor, bad student, juvenile delinquent. The one that I hate the most, at risk. You won't be able to use them. Why? Those kids live that every day. They say it to each other. Sometimes, unfortunately, it's been repeated in school systems. It's been repeated in the community center. It's been repeated by mommy and daddy. I'm gonna say it again. It's been repeated by mommy and daddy. And if you can think about the historical pain, to me it makes sense. Because that's what my mama told me. At 14 years old, boy, I hear, quote, boy, I hear you talk about going to college. If you're going, you better get, what's that thing they call? Better get a scholarship because we don't have any money. No insight about financial aid, nothing about grants. And I mean, at this point, I'm rocking out in schools before that other puberty word hits you and you start thinking you're somebody because you scored a touchdown on Friday night. Before that happened to me, I had like a 4.3 GPA. And I actually felt I was deserving of something because in my mind, I was keeping the other things out of her life. Because my responsibility as a kid was to make her proud. That was it. How do you make her proud? Don't be a problem child. It was really that simple in my house. Just don't be what everybody else is being and cause trouble. Messengers. Got my work ethic. I got my value systems from the same woman that told me that you should go get a job after high school. The same person that laid down in a cotton field gave me the work ethic and the courage to stand up in front of people and share those stories combined with former education stories with hope that we change the way we think about each other. We use an assets-based approach. We're not going to talk about the crack fiend mama in a negative way. We're going to pull the good from these kids. Some of our best artists the music, the blues, the jazz, the country, it comes from pain. While our kids are often alienated for the things we've seen others become stars in. Who was the messenger that told Coltrane? That was a messenger. We love to talk about a meritocracy, but man, do you know how hard that is to fight the world and think of yourself as being great every day? Where the constructs or the structures that we have in place are telling you not to love yourself. Indirectly or directly, y'all, that is not easy. And I'm pretty sure you have some of them sitting in front of you in your offices at time. But I think as adults, as the news reporter asked me, so you think the responsibility of educating kids is on the adults, not the kids? What? No, I don't know. Was it 14? How many of you at the age of 14 without any guardianship when you got suspended, don't say suspended, but got suspended? How many of you did the homework that the teacher sent home with you? Oh my God, we forget about life and maturity and human development. Sometimes, don't we? We don't need to use all that formal education for everything. Sometimes kids are just kids. And I'm a proud father. You know one of the best things I get the opportunity to do? I get to help guide her decisions. Guide them. Not dictate them. Guide them. I know when she needs me to step in to just listen. I know when it's time to empower her to say, you are an intelligent person, with hopes that that mistake that she makes because that boy never should have been in our relationship isn't a lifelong issue. But as soon as you start painting a picture about him not being worthy of your time, I'm sorry, I do a lot of gender work, but guess what? She's gonna find a way to sin because there's something about him that has her attention. I was that boy. I was that boy. I had to stand across the street from my high school girlfriend because I wasn't in the Jack and Jill program. My parents were not meeting with them to play the high social functions in the neighborhood. 15 years old. Stand across the street, young man. You can't come in my yard. I don't know why I was dating her, but we know why I was dating her. That puberty thing was going crazy. But accepted that. And that's just one relationship. Can you imagine those barriers that we're talking about and the mindset you must have to overcome those and believe, right? Because I had school teachers that told me, boy, you need to leave that fast girl alone, go somewhere and sit down. You can't say that these days, right? You can't say those conversations. I said I got bused when I was 9 years old was because my mother filled out the paperwork for me to be tested for gifted programs. Guess what? Guess who did it? It was that school teacher that looked at me and said, oh my God, there's a lot going on at home and you are not going to share it with you, are you? I even lied when she asked me, did your parents see the letter that came home about you being tested? No, ma'am, we didn't get a letter. When she's working 2 jobs and there's no father in the home, when she tells you every morning before you get on that school bus, baby, don't tell nobody. And she's wiping these off, right? Don't you tell nobody what happens at home. That's real. That's real. So my loyalty to her and protecting our secrets, you internalize them, and that pain comes out one way or another. And those messengers along my journey, they saw it. They didn't put me out because I answered the question before I raised my hand based on the rules. They said, there's something about this boy. If we can catch him early enough, he might be a productive citizen and add to the conversation. I'm sorry, I love me, but I go into a lot of spaces where I see a lot of that in our kids. And if we could just grab her right now, give her some hope, give her some affirmation, and not always talk about the things that we know are present that are derogatory in our life. As messengers, that's my job. That's my job as a person that's been given so much to come from where I came from, but also get to another space and not forget who I am. I wouldn't change it for the world. I need us. I need you. I need you looking back, talking, and thinking about what Mother gave you as value systems and challenging them, right? Because some of the things my mother gave me about populations and institutions and agencies that I wasn't supposed to be in, Wasn't true. It wasn't true. Some of those kids are walking in with the same thing. When the parents are calling and they're cursing out the guidance counselors, they're forgetting that the kid has to go back to school, and that negative conversation. I just can't wait till you get out to 7th grade, because I'm sick of this school stuff. That happens every day, because that mother has been also alienated from a positive experience when they were in the 7th grade with the same school. Oops, should have changed. How? If you didn't do well in school, low educational attainment, unemployment, poverty, crime. It sounds good to just pick yourself up by your bootstraps and change it. And I'm awfully very cautious about who I am and sharing so much, because certain populations, right? Well, do it like Chad did it. Do it like he did it. That's why that difference comes in, right? Because if you appreciate it, then you say, oh, it's not the same. I'm the only one from my neighborhood that made it through college. How many of us went? A lot. You can throw that ball, shoot the ball, they give you a shot these days. That wasn't enough for them to get up every morning to be at the 8 o'clock class. That wasn't enough for them to actually read the book and write the essay on it. They brought those same structural issues with them, and I'm not excusing accountability, and ended up back home, back in those unemployment, low educational attainment environments. 70% of those clients as a bail bondsman were those same guys that we used to sit in the car with and said, we ain't gonna be nothing like our daddies when we grow up. First thing we're gonna do is we're gonna buy our mamas a house. Y'all know what I'm saying. We mama's boys. No matter what, we're gonna take care of mama. We used to sit back there and just like bond together off what? Off deficits. Off deficits, off pain. You're not the only one. I just gave you the example of music, what that does to us. But for some reason, we forget about that with our young boys and girls. So when I'm saying this, it's about us challenging ourselves as messengers to start thinking differently about these populations. How do we think differently about it? Do not make excuses and get rid of accountability. The first thing I did when I joined NASA, Delaware Space Grant, first thing they say, no, we'll use law enforcement. So I'm working with recruitment, retention, and hiring. What do you think the first thing law enforcement officers always say when you bring in, we need to diversify the pool? But Dr. Stark, we don't want to lower our standards. Yes, ma'am. That's the first thing, unconsciously. And I actually stop and I actually hold my hands out when they do that, because I really want to give them a hug. Because I, at that point, have some empathy about the privilege and entitlement of being a cop that they have bought into. Sometimes it's not their fault. We got bad systems with good people. We got bad systems with good people. I'm sorry, I don't give up that easy. I stand in these spaces where I'm not supposed to be, right? But I believe in them. I believe that if we work on this and we work on that ethic of care, and we take our responsibility as messengers in our homes, in our neighborhoods, in our churches, I think this thing could look so much different. So much different. What are we waiting on? My brother used to always call me and aggravate me about changing hearts. Because these conversations don't always go that well. Last week I was in a meeting. I'm a part of an international organization. 7:30 I go to the meeting. And we have a new regime, new president. Brings up his board. He says great things about the board members. And there are 8 men and 1 female. What do you think I'm thinking? Can we please acknowledge that we need to work on diversifying our board? Can we just say that? No. 1 female was African American. He's talking about skill sets and how much they are dedicated to the organization. And he, quote, as most of you all know, I grew up on a tobacco farm in North Carolina. And And I mean, there were some hard-working people on the tobacco farm. And then he turns, and I'm not gonna say her name, but he says, but if she would have been on a tobacco farm, she would have outworked them all. He took a black woman in Central Virginia, North Carolina, tobacco farms. Why you just didn't call her your bed witch? Shirley Chisholm, you couldn't? Michelle Obama, you couldn't? You couldn't talk about her intellectual prowess as an example for how good her commitment is being received to a service organization? You had to make her into a slave. What do, Chad? You sitting in this room, you working with these folks, we going to Guatemala to do water projects. You can't let this go. You got a responsibility as you may risk the relationships. You may risk the proposal that you just put into BWXT, which is a $2 billion company that produces the nuclear fuel for NASA. Because that's where you met the CEO. Man, I wanted to get back to being that rental property owner. I owe it. I'm not exactly sure if the young lady realized it as well, because she had this biggest smile on her face. And I had to step outside because the tear came. Because it's unconscious when the person delivering the discriminatory comment, but I think it's sad when the person that the comment was about doesn't even realize that they've been insulted. And that's what post-racial will do for you. Oh no, I'm here, I'm in the room, I'm glad, I appreciate it. It doesn't stop the unconscious way that we're thinking about each other, because we're not supposed to acknowledge race. And there's no way, if he understood the history of this land, this nation, Virginia and North Carolina, and he sees this woman up here, there's no way that that young man would have allowed himself to connect those two. And she has the job of a secretary and the president-elect. None of the men are doing half of the work. I started asking where the babies were. It's 2017 and we still having to explain equity, not equality. How we doing on time? I know I can talk. About 10 minutes. Okay, so in doing this, is what we do in my firm. We talk about 4 constructs. I'm not going to beat it up a whole lot, but I did want to share with you what you have before you here. I talk about identity, and I'm going to assume that you can see that I define identity a little different than what most would. And I talk about a perceptual lens of looking through life. So when we're talking to our kids in the 14 to 18-year group, what do you think the first session is going to be about? Oh, baby, you got to love yourself. Everything that's happened in this country and building the first penitentiary the Quakers did in Pennsylvania in the early 19th century, they didn't know you was coming. It ain't your fault. They been locking people up way before you home. But that ain't what they're going to tell you. They're going to tell you the worst thing since sliced bread. I ain't never had no kid like you before. You the first student I ever had in my class that talked to me that way. Nope. Because not only do you have to know your identity, you got to understand the perceptual identity that society has about you. It's my responsibility as a messenger to hurt their feelings and build them back up and tell them that maybe everyone doesn't think that you can be a productive citizen. I have to stand before them and tell them that in order to educate them about why these conversations are being had about you. I got to tell them about people like me with a PhD in criminology that can actually go write a grant for $4 or $5 million to come into your home neighborhood and write about you to advance my career. Never come back with an action plan to change those structural conditions of why the government thought it was important enough to allow me to apply for the funds, let alone get them. My career has been made off the backs of the same people that I've been talking about every day, and I was even one of those people. I'm going to tell them that I did that. They deserve to know exactly how we frame impoverished communities. We are the bevy of grant writing. How many times do you want to go to the suburbs and talk about crime? Oh, NIJ don't pony up $2-3 million for that. They deserve to know these conversations so they can see themselves through a different identity and a different lens. Now you can empower them. Hey, you know, if you go get this legitimacy, right, you can come write about your own neighborhood. You can tell a story about being a bail bondsman and growing up and changing the way you think about the population and knowing that you can perpetuate the same discrimination as that system. I was a part of a bad system. You can tell them that you don't have to accept it. But there's some steps along the way that are going to be tough. But if you trust in it enough, we can get you there. Culture. What a better opportunity to show them something totally different than the same community center that they've been going to each and every day. We're going to move them around. We're going to meet twice a month. In class, going to be a formal education session. 2 weeks later, we're adding a cultural experience and event to match that in-class education. Why? Kids need to touch something. They need to see it on their faces. They need to see it on their backs. They need to be able to apply it. So we're going to expose them to so many different cultures that they aren't going to know that they don't deserve to be in among. Diversity is a word that, of course, I say is a cuss word because we love to check boxes on gender and race. That's so insulting to the intellectual people we have in this room as well as in society. We do different ways of thinking. We want inclusion, different ways of being, different ways of knowing. And if you have those, guess what will fall out? Race and gender and class. Different ways of being, different ways of thinking, different ways of knowing. It'll fall out on its own. But you got to be a consistent messenger to those ideas. It has to. And the last one is respect. So that's what we're going to have our job training, our job readiness skills. They're going to earn this, right? I've secured a barber shop. I have, I should charge them if I advertise where I get my clothes from now. But the place where I go in Lynchburg, they're going to do ties and they're going to supply me with the outfits so that my men will be dressed as they should be dressed in this society for professional identity, and they're going to go on interviews. I'm working on the clothing store for my ladies and the beauty salon just to wash and set. No chemicals, I get it. Liability, they aren't going to do it. Because the jobs for the education, the employment starts as soon as they get out of school. We have jobs from Public Works, we have jobs from Parks and Rec, we have jobs from Water Resources, we have jobs from libraries and museums. I am proud to say 2 weeks ago, I met with the organization Humankind. They have 3 jobs as lifeguards, so these kids are going to be certified lifeguards by being in the program as well. I so appreciate it. Just met with Genworth, who's about to be bought out by another company. Just got a phone call or a text on the way up here. They want to meet with me to see if they could be a corporate sponsor. I'm telling you, people care. BWXT wants to come on and do it. They won't change. What happens? The messengers are what happened. We stopped being messengers. I wouldn't have known that they was interested if I wouldn't have spent the last 2 years trying to get the city to take the responsibility and offer up the resources. But when that happens, people's ears, they come open. That ethic of care becomes easier. Oh, if they're doing it, then it must be okay. But I need my messengers to be willing to get tomatoes thrown at us sometimes, to be willing to get called crazy, to be willing to sometimes risk some financial security. As I was thinking about my grandfather and the risk he's taken, I don't think I'm asking anything too far-fetched as we understand the history and who has stood in front of water hoses, who has been beaten down and deaths have been taken. We've forgotten what others have sacrificed, and there was way more unity standing in those front lines where facial and racial expressions wasn't the same. People have been pulling up from different ethnicities and races to fight against injustice for so long. But we don't get to tell that to a lot of the conservative identities do. They only think that Black Lives Matter is for Black people to advocate. That's on us as messengers, folks. We gotta teach. We gotta bring awareness, and you can't be afraid of what society identifies as truths. You gotta dig to that ethical care and know you're doing the right thing, and put it on the line and say it's gonna come back if you believe in it. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you. I can't express to you how grateful it is for me to be in this point in my life, to be invited, like I said before, but to be able to have meaningful conversations with those that I know will become messengers for life. Thank you.